Hello everyone, welcome to section 3 titled Making a Level. In this section we are going to first look at creating a level class and level controller to load level data from CSV. We will then look at creating different game elements from the data we've loaded. Next we will add a moving camera so that we can navigate through the level. Then we will add a target for the end of the level as well as add in def logic. Finally we will look at the advantages of creating a level editor. This video is titled Loading Data from CSV. In this video we're going to look at creating a level class and loading the data for the level from a CSV file. For our game it's unfeasible to create every element through code and it will be very messy, so we're going to implement the ability to load levels using data in a CSV file. A CSV file is a file where each field is separated using a comma. We will use a row to store information for an entire element and will separate each field into a separate element. We're going to start by creating a level class. This class will store all the data loaded from the CSV file. Go to your Solution Explorer. In game.shared, add a new folder. Call it level. Then in here create a new class. Call the class level. Make the class a public class. This class is simply going to store an array of strings for the data for the level, and its main function is to load the data from the CSV and store the data where we can access it. So the only field this class will have is an array of strings called data. We will also need to add a property that will just retrieve the data. Next we're going to add a constructor which has a parameter for the file name. In here we're going to read the text for the file, similar to how we loaded our shaders. First we define a string for the data. Next we need to add checks for Android and iOS to perform different actions to load the file. Let's start with Android first. To do this we're going to need to get a reference to the asset manager, so we need to make a quick change to the game activity class. So go to your Solution Explorer, and in engine.android open the game activity class. In here we make the internal static instance of the activity into a public static instance. Now go back to the level class. Don't forget when you add the using for Android, wrap them in an if define as well. Then for the Android project we're first going to get the asset manager from the game activity, and we're going to set file found to false. Now in a try catch we're going to try to load the data for the file the same way that we loaded the shader, using a stream reader. Once the file has been read we set file found to true. If the file has not been found we're going to throw a file not found exception. For iOS it's a little simpler than the Android project. We first check if the file exists. If it doesn't, we throw a file not found exception. Otherwise, we get the data using file.readAllText with the file name. Once we have the data, we're going to split the file by a new line. Now we're going to create a level controller. This is going to store all the levels and we'll use it to control the current level. So in your Solution Explorer, go back to game.shared and in the level folder add a new class. Call the class level controller. Make the class a public class. This is going to be a singleton class, so we're going to add a private static reference and a property to retrieve the controller. Next we add an int for the current level. Then we need a list of all the levels. Now we'll add properties. We're going to add a property for the current level which returns the level from the array. The last property is a boolean for whether or not the game is complete, which just checks if the current level is greater than the number of levels. Next we're going to add a private constructor. In this constructor we're going to load the data for the level. In the load level data method we're going to loop through the number of levels and load all the files. Before we fill this in we're going to need to add a new constant for the number of levels. So go to your Solution Explorer and in the base folder open the constants file. At the bottom here add the number of levels and we'll set it to 2 for now. For these tutorials we're only going to create 2 levels, however feel free to create and add more. Now go back to your level controller class. In here we're going to add a load level data method. This method will loop through all the levels using the constant and it will add it to the list of levels. Then in the constructor we're going to call this method. Next we're going to add a method to change the level which increases the index for the current level. Finally we add a reset method which resets the current level index to 0. Our next step is to add the Two Levels Csv Files. Go to your Solution Explorer and in game.android, go to Assets, Content, and add a new folder in here. Name the folder Levels. Now go to the root of your project directory. In here, go to the Assets folder and add a new folder called Levels. Then open up Notepad and go to File and select Save As. Navigate to the Levels folder. In here, name the file level0.csv and choose the Save As type as all files, and then click Save. Then go to File, Save As again, and this time name the file level1. Don't forget to set it to all files, and name the file level1.csv. Now close Notepad and go back to Visual Studio. In the Levels folder, right-click, select Add and select Existing Item. Navigate to where we just saved the levels, select them both, and select Add as Link. Then select them both, go to Properties, and save them as Android Asset and Copy if newer. Now close the file that opens up, and go to your Solution Explorer again. Now we need to add the files for iOS, so go to game.ios, go to Content, and in here add a new folder. Name the folder Levels. Then right-click and add Existing Item, and then select the two levels again in the Assets Levels folder. Don't forget to add them as a link. Then select the two files, go to Properties, and then save them as Bundle Resource and Copy if newer. So the last step is to populate the data in the files. I've created two levels already and I've filled in the data for these levels, which you'll find in the project. However, feel free to design the levels to use in place of mine. Each element starts with the key for the type, so for the first example, the type is a sprite. Then each field is separated by commas, so for example, the Z order field, and then the texture field after that. Each individual value in the field is separated by the pipe character. So here, the Z order is 0, and the texture is defined to be Content Graphics Act1 Background.png. This is so we can define multiple values for things like offset, which need the X and the Y value. So in summary, we have now implemented level loading from files. The file contains all the data for each element in a level.